I was always treated as less than my golden child sister, but I got the ultimate revenge on my wedding day. Growing up, I always felt like I was living in the shadow of my golden child sister. From the get-go, my parents clearly favored her, and you'd need a shovel to dig up any subtlety in that. If she pointed a finger at me for something, my folks believed her without blinking and I'd get punished. But if I ever dared to call her out, even if I had rock-solid evidence, she'd get a slap on the wrist, and somehow, I'd still get a scolding. Birthdays? They were a joke. The cake was always her favorite flavor, while I had to pretend I didn't hate it. Shopping trips ended with her receiving more stuff than me, and any outing had to align with her interests, even if it was supposedly about me. She was spoiled rotten and treated me like her personal punching bag. Initially, she just ignored me, but things nosedived when we hit our teen years. She lost her friends, whether they ditched her or moved away, I had no idea since we were never close, and her behavior got worse. My parents always bragged about her accomplishments but conveniently forgot to mention any of her issues. In contrast, my flaws were fair game for teasing. The only reason I knew she was friendless was that we went to the same school, and I noticed she was flying solo. Meanwhile, I had my little social scene going, which seemed to irk her. That's when she went full throttle, accusing me and my friends of all sorts of nonsense. My parents started buying into it, saying I couldn't hang out with bad influences, or questioning why I wasn't more like my sister, who treasured so-called family time. Luckily, I had my extended family. They lived nearby and I got along great with my cousins, who were older or younger than me. At some family gathering, they invited me to something, who knows what, and I told them, straight up, that I wasn't allowed to socialize because my sister didn't have friends. Word traveled back to the grown-ups, and they apparently ripped into my parents. But instead of a heartfelt apology, I got grounded for a month for lying. Still, it was worth it because my folks eased up a bit after that. Eventually, my sister changed schools. I guess she couldn't handle the embarrassment after the family found out about her friend's situation, so my parents let her transfer to a different school, even if it cost more because it was further away. She did make friends there, but she never stopped making my life miserable. Her new friends joined the bullying bandwagon too, and my parents brushed it off as just teasing. I never had friends over because of how my parents acted and because my sister would accuse them of stealing. My parents would totally believe her. But I maintained a good relationship with my cousins since my parents wouldn't dare pull that kind of stuff with family. Then came my first boyfriend. I was hesitant to bring him home, but my parents insisted. During one visit, while we were temporarily separated, he rushed to find me, saying my sister was coming on to him. She showed up in revealing clothes, batting her eyelashes, and tried to paint me as a terrible girlfriend while elevating herself. My boyfriend was put off by it and ran to tell me ASAP. Of course, my sister flipped the script when telling my parents, claiming my boyfriend had hit on her but she heroically turned him down. And who did my parents believe? Her, naturally. Now, my boyfriend wasn't perfect, but I believed his story. Why? Because, as a resentful and moody teen, I knew my sister was just as awful as I suspected. And let's be frank, there was no way he'd cheat with her, not because of her looks, but because she was just so mean and spoiled. She never learned to work for anything. Our parents handed her everything on a silver platter. Anyway, my parents banned the relationship, and it fizzled out despite my attempts to keep it under wraps. My next boyfriend got the same treatment with my sister accusing him of flirting. When he rejected her, my parents believed her again, saying I couldn't pick a good guy. Naturally, the relationship couldn't handle the Romeo and Juliet pressure and ended too. My sister brought home a boyfriend who my parents flaunted like a trophy. They spent every moment comparing me to her fantastic choice, until he vanished, and suddenly he was the worst. Despite all this favoritism, my sister had more spending money and better curfews. She was free to do whatever, while I was still hit with restrictions. If I complained, my parents said it was an age thing, but when I reached that age, the rules didn't change. They ignored their own double standards, always citing my supposedly poor judgment as evidence of why I wasn't as trustworthy as my sister. When she graduated, she got into a college that wasn't top-notch, and it's not like she had a scholarship or anything. My parents, however, only told me about her successes, keeping me in the dark about the rest. So, I don't really know exactly how my sister got rejected when she tried for something, but I do know her grades were pretty bad in school. We used to throw a mini party every time she got a B compared to that. I usually did well in school, but my parents wouldn't celebrate my good grades. They'd always say, "What's the big deal? You always get good grades." Naturally, they made a big fuss over my sister and promised to pay for everything for her college. I was kind of relieved she was going away, but honestly, It didn't make my life any easier. She'd come home every other weekend, and things would go missing from my room, or she'd find some way to make my life difficult. My curfews stayed as strict as ever. As graduation was creeping up for me, I'm just a year younger than she is, my mom sat me down for a chat. She basically told me that since they were paying for her college, there wasn't any money left for mine. She suggested I start working right after high school and wait until my sister was done with her studies to see if they'd have some money for me. Oh, and if I planned to stay home, I'd have to chip in for all my stuff, some of the bills, and even rent. I mentioned I could just get student loans, but my mom was like, yes and no, because they were so concerned about my decisions, they'd decide which college was worth the debt. I didn't know how they'd actually stop me from getting loans, but I didn't question it. Scholarships were never brought up, and honestly, they didn't really care about my grades or believe in me. I took it all in, didn't bat an eyelid, and just said, okay. My mom seemed surprised, maybe expecting me to kick up a fuss so they'd have a reason never to pay for my college. But nope, I just said I understood, thanked them for caring, and that was that. My dad tried the same tactic later, but I stayed cool. At that point, after years of their poor parenting, I'd pretty much given up on expecting them to support my education. I'd known for a while they'd find an excuse not to pay for me and that they'd make my life harder. I never once believed they'd actually help if I worked and waited for my sister to graduate. I'd been hitting the books hard because college was my ticket to freedom. When the time came, I worked my butt off and snagged a scholarship, not to an Ivy League or anything, but a decent college with a full ride. I knew my sister would hate it and try to mess with me through my parents, so I posted my achievement on social media at the same time I told them, even pretending to thank them in the post. Now they couldn't stop me from going, or they'd have to explain why to the family. At first, they were kind of proud and bragged about it, but then my sister must have gotten to them, and they started asking if I was sure about going. They hinted that my sister was struggling in college and said since she was supposedly smarter and had better judgment, I'd likely do worse. I stood my ground, and they weren't thrilled but couldn't do much about it. College turned out to be my escape, and I was finally happy. I still kept in touch with my parents and visited on holidays, but since they refused to fund anything, I didn't go back as much, citing money issues. During this time, I made sure not to introduce any guy to them, and my sister eventually stopped going to college. I know she didn't graduate because, well, they'd have thrown a big party if she had. She moved back home without paying bills or rent, but it was different, according to my parents, and started working at the same company as my mom, thanks to some string pulling from her side. Somehow, this was supposed to be a point of pride for me. Around this time, I met my husband. You know those people who say, if I were in that situation, I'd have done something? Well, my husband is actually the type who does something. I'm more of the shy, doormat type in any situation, staying up at night, wishing I'd said something witty or done something bold. I'm the person who can't help but cry when I'm angry. My husband, on the other hand, is the guy who immediately claps back. He loves resolving drama. If he doesn't immediately respond to a slight, watch out, because he's cooking up something big for revenge. He was the one who suggested I share our story online, even considered posting on a nuclear revenge board, though we decided what we did wasn't quite nuclear. People were surprised at how we got together, but just because I couldn't act like him, given my upbringing, didn't mean I didn't appreciate it. I love that he can stand up for us, and he treats people well as long as they return the favor. When we started talking about marriage, we realized we didn't care too much about the ceremony because we wanted to save up for our dream trip to Europe for our honeymoon. Since his family is kind of scattered and mine is mostly in my hometown, we decided to have the wedding there. We didn't live far away either, so it was manageable to take long trips over the weekends to sort everything out, with some work flexibility letting us stay in my hometown a bit if needed. We sent out the engagement announcement and the save the date for a few months later. Naturally, my parents wanted to meet my fiancée. I wanted to say no, stand up for myself, but it was hard. The distance had made me think maybe my parents weren't all that bad. Well, my husband looked like I ruined Christmas when I told him I'd have to see them at least once. But I promised they'd never be alone with him. He was all ready for it. He even got a high-quality recorder to hide in his pocket so he could record the whole encounter. He was thrilled, already imagining how he would handle it if my sister tried to make a move on him or cause trouble. So here's the scoop. My partner went to meet my family solo because I had tried in the past without success. He came back all excited and was like, "Babe, you won't believe the crazy stuff they want. We could totally mess with them, there are so many options." I was curious and wanted to hear the recording, but he cleverly suggested I listen to him first, so I wouldn't get the wrong idea. Turns out, instead of the usual small talk, my parents and sister sat him down. After some grumbling about how they weren't thrilled with him or my choices, they came up with an offer. They'd pay for our wedding, but only if my sister got to walk down the aisle first, dressed up in a wedding gown, to have that experience. Their reasoning? It wasn't right for the younger sister, me, to get married before the older one. They wanted her to have the full wedding experience, including pictures and a cake. My now hubby, who's quite the schemer, was floored by this ridiculous proposal. But instead of lashing out, he played it cool and pretended to need time to think about it. Back to me, the wife, my husband, now grinning, shared how my parents tried to make my wedding about my sister. I was stunned. I knew they weren't always kind, but this was a new level. Fortunately, my husband's idea of revenge kept me from spiraling. We got creative, imagining mad ways to mess with them, from the wacky to the doable. We even looped in his sensible brother for advice. He told us off a bit, warning us that some plans could get us sued and that others were too risky. In the end, we settled on a simple but effective plan: act like we're on board, then hire security to keep my sister out of the wedding. But that was just the start of our little revenge plot. My hubby, with my full backing, went back to them and pretended he'd tried but guessed I'd be against it, though he was willing to support the idea to keep peace in the family. He argued that surprising me might prevent drama since I don't like making a scene. They totally bought it, with my sister practically dancing with joy. My husband played it perfectly, claiming these were my ideas born out of past trust issues, so nothing was ever written down. Then came the fun part: we milked it. We'd pretend to pick out cheaper menu and drink options and then let my sister try them, prompting her to whine about wanting the best. My parents would cave and pay. We pulled the same trick with flowers and the photographer. The wedding dress was tricky since my mom texted me, leaving a paper trail, but we sidestepped that hurdle too. Throughout, all planning was in person to avoid written evidence. The best part? We didn't really care about the ceremony, so we just let them think they were getting their way while we were quietly orchestrating our day exactly as we wanted. So, here's what went down. My husband and I had this whole scheme to make my sister and parents think I was this crazy, controlling person. It started with me replying to my sister when she tried to text my hubby, which just backed up everything my husband was claiming about me. They totally bought into it and didn't risk putting anything in writing. I know some people would hate their partner talking trash about them to family, but I'm such a pushover that I found it hilarious and encouraged him. I guess my sense of humor is a bit skewed. Oh, and get this, my sister actually tried to flirt with my husband. He played it off like he was torn about it to really sell the whole act. He'd pretend to tell them stuff behind my back, but he never let on that we'd hired security for our wedding. The whole thing was super funny. We were originally just going to have a simple courthouse wedding and save money for the honeymoon, but we ended up with a lavish wedding without breaking the bank. We joked that it was payback from my parents for emotional damages. My husband was really into the whole prank more than the actual wedding planning. I never thought I'd see him all excited about spending a Saturday on a car trip to talk wedding details with my in-laws, but there he was. Finally, the big day came. My parents, sister, and husband had this goofy plan for her to show up as I was supposed to be walking down the aisle, so I wouldn't notice and stop her. They thought it'd be too late by the time I found out. As for my dress, we had leftover fabric from alterations, which my husband took to my parents and sister to pretend he'd ruined it, feeding into the drama. On the wedding day, our real security was hidden initially. When my parents showed up, they only saw a lady checking people off a list. Once they were settled, we revealed our real security, a guy who looked like a total bodyguard. We told him not to let my sister in and offered a nice tip to keep quiet about it. Soon, my parents got a text that my sister was just minutes away, so my dad signaled the ceremony to start without checking with me. My bridesmaids were in on it, so they just went with it. Meanwhile, a friend not in the wedding party texted me to get ready and avoid suspicion. This friend was as drama-loving as my husband and I, so she didn't mind not being a bridesmaid and helped out. My dad was waiting at the entrance for me. When I finally walked in, he was shocked to see me and tried to see what happened to my sister but couldn't. His phone rang, it was her. He mumbled something about needing to go and left, causing a lot of gasps and confusion. The friend asked loudly what was going on, and I played along with fake tears, saying my dad said it wasn't supposed to be me there, which made him look bad. My tears were a mix of acting and real feelings because I was genuinely hurt. The friend then loudly asked, "What did he mean it shouldn't be you?" So everyone could hear and spread the chaos. She dashed off to investigate, distracting my dad from stopping the ceremony. Eventually, my mom left too. My husband's dad rushed over, knowing he might need to step in. His quick dash made me smile, and I continued down the aisle amid whispers about what was happening. When I reached my husband, He reassured me and joked about my Oscar-worthy sad face. The ceremony went on without issues. My parents didn't come back, but I noticed people leaving and returning during the reception, whispering about the drama. My husband was told something that made him try not to smile. Later, he filled me in on everything that happened outside. Turns out, my sister showed up in a wedding dress. Our security didn't let her in, just as we planned. He told her she must be at the wrong venue since there was already a bride. We tipped him well for that. My dad tried to threaten him with calling the police, but the security guy was like, "Sure, let's call them," because he was just doing his job. Realizing time was ticking, my dad demanded my sister be let in, but by then, our friend was there making a scene and stalling them. By the time my mom and others arrived, the wedding plan was trashed. Horrified guests started yelling at my parents for trying to pull such a stunt. My parents and sister naturally tried to shift blame to my husband. When they called him over, he played dumb, acting all confused and denying everything. His poker face was flawless. They couldn't show any proof to back their claims because all they had were vague text exchanges that didn't prove anything. It was a total win for us. So, get this, at my wedding, where you'd expect the usual drama about picking flowers or cake flavors, it turned into a whole soap opera. My sister went full toddler tantrum, screaming and kicking on the floor. My dad looked ready to take a swing at my husband, but luckily, security and some folks held him back. Apparently, they couldn't provide any proof of whatever nonsense they were claiming because my husband had told them not to text him about it. My husband just laughed and said, "Well, isn't that convenient?" He gave them a piece of his mind, calling them awful parents and saying he wouldn't let their ridiculous plans mess up our big day. The whole venue was buzzing, but they wouldn't let me see any camera footage since it was only for security reasons. However, some guests caught snippets on their phones. Watching my parents and sister get what was coming to them felt like the best wedding gift ever. My mom was sobbing, my dad's face kept changing colors, and my sister was still throwing a fit on the floor. They kept trying to drag my husband into it, saying he was part of their crazy scheme, but nobody bought it. They had no decent answers when people asked why he would agree to something so dumb. Eventually, they got kicked out. My dad had to practically drag my sister up off the floor. Everyone seemed extra nice to me that night, maybe because I was the bride and not just another guest. My husband joked that the fancy food and drinks we had kept everyone in high spirits. We had an amazing time despite all the drama, and my husband's fake angry face lasted only a short while before he broke into smiles again. Afterward, we headed to the hotel to rest up for our honeymoon. Oh, and about our honeymoon, my parents tried to pay for our plane tickets, but we turned them down, thinking they might try to cancel them or something. Since the fiasco, they've been trying to reach me, but I've ignored their calls. My husband suggested keeping a paper trail, which was smart, because my sister ended up sending me a bizarre and angry message. She blamed me for her embarrassment and called my husband names, claiming he'd tricked them. My husband found it amusing and even wanted to frame the message. She made these wild claims about my husband cheating on me, even with her, which was just insane. My husband took screenshots of all the calls and messages, including those from my parents, and sent them to our family group chat. He also shared the nasty messages they sent him. He made a clear point that he never agreed to anything and even mentioned the possibility of suing them for harassment. He asked the rest of the family to help stop my parents and sister from wrecking our honeymoon like they tried with the wedding. Thankfully, they've backed off since, though my husband was a bit bummed my sister didn't cause more drama so he could call her out again. All in all, while it wasn't the picture-perfect family scenario I'd hoped for, it turned out to be a satisfying win for us. As for why they treated me this way, I've wondered about that forever. I think it might be because I was unplanned. They had my sister after some time and clearly wanted her, but I showed up soon after. Being not well off, having another baby was probably tough on them, and maybe they couldn't help but resent me. It's just my guess, but I've come to terms with the fact that their reasons don't really matter. What they did was wrong, plain and simple. My husband and I have a theory that they never actually planned to go through with this whole mess. Maybe my sister was just upset that I got married before she even had a steady date, and my parents made some ridiculous suggestion they never thought we'd take seriously. When we accepted, they were trapped, they couldn't back out without risking a fallout with my sister. Anyway, if you're still here, thanks for sticking around, and don't forget to subscribe for more wild